Hello everyone, welcome to the nightly stream. I'm the Enforcer, and today we'll be going over the current developments on the front line of Ukraine in Day 5. So far, up in the north area of the country near the Kiev area, it appears that the Ukrainians have held strong and have in fact pushed the Russians back out of the city. This comes as a great shock to Western analysts because no one believed that the Ukrainians would be able to push back a besieging army, yet nonetheless, they have managed to push them out of the northwestern area of the city, and for that reason, I have completely kept the front line the same so I could change it on screen so that way everyone could realize the major victory that the Ukrainians have had today over the Russians. And so for that, I'll edit this front line very quickly. In other news, we have specific instances from the front today. For example, we have seen that Russian troops have now arrived in the town of Bordyanka. As video evidence shows here, there is now a Russian convoy moving through the village. And I'll cut that short. I'm just wanting to make sure that y'all know that Russian troops are now within the city limits of Borodyanka, which I may have pronounced earlier. I'm sorry. I'm not really good with the Ukrainian names, because, for one, I've never really spoke Russian or the Ukrainian, so unfortunately I'm not really good with that. On other news, there's a 17-mile-long convoy. Now, when I got the news, it was reported as a 17-mile-long convoy, but later on in the day, it was reported as a 40-mile-long convoy. So, in the absence of real proof that it was 40 miles along. I'm going to assume that it was still 17 miles long as the original report stated, but nonetheless, here are satellite pictures of that convoy heading towards Kiev several hours ago. As you can see, it is absolutely massive and consists of several hundred trucks and most likely armored personnel carriers and tanks as well, as most Russian battalion tactical groups are organized in a way that relies heavily on their armored capabilities. In other news, in the actual area of Kiev, there has been heavy fighting in the cities of Bucha and Irpin, and today we've seen more proof of that in the evidence of a propaganda vehicle being destroyed. The propaganda vehicle was a Russian armored car, a Gaz Tiger, and it had an intercom on top of it, and it was just blaring out propaganda messages from the Russians, and suffice it to say, it didn't last long. Here's the video to show y'all. What was really funny about that is that the Russians were actually saying over the intercom that everything was under control and they had the town under control, and then they got hit by an RPG. So I guess that was kind of ironic in a way. Also, on the other side, the Russians were destroyed in Irpin, but the graphical footage was too much to show on stream. So if you want to join the Discord, that is currently linked on the Discord page. Meanwhile, within the city of Kiev, there appears to be some interesting developments as well. For example, Kiev is holding strong, although it appears that the Russians are starting to directly target the city with artillery. And when I say that, Ukraine, the capital city of Kiev, has already been targeted almost constantly by artillery, regardless of what kind it is. But now it appears that the shelling is becoming very indiscriminate across the entire country, and it looks like they're not trying to avoid civilian casualties anymore. I'll let y'all see the footage and let it talk for itself. Just a little quick snippet, but you'll see more of that in Kharkiv, because it was much more pronounced on video in Kharkiv than it was in Kiev. Also, some other news that's interesting from the city is that a man has sent a picture from inside the city showing his improvised bulletproof armor. I guess it's really true that every man must do his duty, and this man is taking that to the extreme by coming up with his own body armor. And I have to say that the resilience of the Kiev defenders cannot be understated, because at the moment, they have been holding, they've even pushed back the Russians, and now you see civilians even taking the initiative to almost become as armored as the normal infantryman in the Ukrainian army. So I have to say that that's really something that this guy has managed to put together, almost combat gear in a way. So that's very good for him. Moving on to the other side of the city, the eastern side, we can see a video of the Ukrainian air defenses hard at work in the night as they are trying to shoot down Russian aircraft that are passing over the city.
Очень много ракет. Очень близко ракеты запускают.
I just want to make it clear to everyone that at the moment, the Russians still do not have air supremacy over Ukraine, which says that the Ukrainian Air Force is working tirelessly along with the air defense forces on the ground day and night to make sure that the Russians cannot get air superiority. If they do, I'm sure that the tactical situation would change drastically across the entirety of the country, but at the moment they still hold air supremacy. Well, they're contesting it, and it looks like that situation will not change for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, in the city of Brovary, there was a Ukrainian base that was destroyed, but according to reports, the base had already been abandoned about a day before, and the Russians destroyed it in an attempt for the Ukrainians to not recapture the supplies within the base. Here's the footage.
Да, зонам не показывайте. Мишка, надо проезжать, потому что они могут еще, значит, лупить. Вот где военная часть. Вот. Разлетелось. Хрен его знаю, блин. Живы ребята, не живы, блин. Короче, ну вот только лупануло, блин, прямо
на блокпосту никого
прямо по
нету.
блокпосту. Прямо по блокпосту, блин.
Блин.
Вот это вот.
As you can see, the destruction was somewhat severe. We don't really know what munitions hit the area, but we know that they apparently were large enough to destroy the entirety of the base and the supplies within it. Moving on to this mark right up here above the city, the location of this footage was unknown, but we did see our first how-to basic of the war, in which a Ukrainian girl showed us how to drive a Russian APC. Let's take a look and see if we can learn something from it.
Свободный или брошенный БТР, то сохраняй лайфхак, как его завести. Включаем массу, оба генератора. Теперь втыкаем обогатитель. Опа. Следующий у нас стартер. Все, завелся. Предохранители. Раз, два, три, четыре. А теперь фары и обдув стекла. Нажимаем сцепление. О! И включаем первую скорость.
So, one thing I would like to note is that although that is a funny and entertaining video, if Ukrainians are watching this stream and you do know of a vehicle that can be captured in your area that's been abandoned, make sure that it's clearly identified as a Ukrainian captured vehicle by flying a Ukrainian flag and removing the markings from the sides of the vehicle, so that way Ukrainian forces can know that that is in fact not an active Russian tank, it's been a captured Ukrainian tank. Just to make sure that no one gets harmed in the process of stealing the free Russian tanks in the countryside. Now, moving on to the area of Chernihiv, we've had a few developments today, although they haven't been as much as previously. The main development in the city today has been that the largest hypermarket in the Chernihiv area was caught on fire today. The status of the supermarket was not known. We do not know if the fire has been extinguished, but at the point of this video, the damage looks severe.
Попадание, блядь. Пидорасы, блядь. Представляешь? Ебашит, блядь. И стрельба, блядь. Нападаем, сука.
Pretty severe damage. Hopefully that doesn't affect the food situation within the city for the civilians, because if it does, then you can maybe start to expect some cases of starvation popping up inside the city. I'd also like to note that so far over the entire course of the war, Chernihiv has remained almost entirely within Ukrainian hands, and that is a raw testament considering that the Russians had to bypass Chernihiv to reach Kiev on the eastern side. That is a raw testament to the true power of the Ukrainian citizen and the defense forces that are helping them protect the city. Because without them, it would be impossible to defend that city. So you have to say that the Ukrainians are beating the Russians bad to be able to hold Chernihiv for this long, the 5th day of the war. Also, we have some footage of TB2s destroying a Russian convoy. The location is somewhere in the Chernihiv area, but I couldn't get an exact pinpoint location. But I'll show you all the footage so that y'all can enjoy the destruction of even more Russian vehicles.
Под ноги, блядь, это работа в Горнянской Байктар, блядь. Вот, блядь. Остатки металлолома, блядь. Жалко, конечно, такую технику запустить у сельское хозяйство, блядь. И можно было бы, конечно, манипуляторов наделать конкретно, блядь. Новый... Давайте останавливать колонны, забирать технику. Новые краны, блядь. Вот, блядь. Вот, но...
As you can see, it appears to be a logistical convoy, considering that they had a crane in the mix, which the logistical convoys and the supply convoys, well, I'm sorry, not logistical, the engineering convoys is the proper term for what I'm trying to say. The destruction of them is paramount, because without supplies, soldiers cannot fight, and that's just a simple rule of war. And so while they may be throwing a 17-mile long or 40-mile long convoy at Kiev, the current logistical situation would lead us to believe that they won't be able to sustain that force for long. You'll probably see many of those vehicles get abandoned, and most Russian soldiers start deserting because there's just simply not enough supplies to keep the units in the area running that are already there. And so I'm sure that a 17 to 40 mile long convoy just won't be able to find the supplies either to keep running. So before I move on to the next area of the front line, I'd like to ask a few questions from the comments. And unfortunately, due to the increased viewership of the channel, I'm not able to personally answer every question. So I've gotten someone to give me some of the questions they have found interesting within the comments. So Drew, do we have any interesting questions?
Alrighty, can you hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty, so we've got a good little handful of questions here, starting off with, what is the name of the song in the introduction?
The name of the song in the introduction, it's in Ukrainian. I can't really pronounce it, but I decided to pick the song because when you actually look at the translated lyrics in English, it speaks directly of pushing the Russians out of the land and getting the elite Muscovites out of the country. So I thought it was very fitting at the moment, considering the situation in the war, and so that song was chosen. But if you join the Discord, I'll send a link to that song video over the Discord. So do we have any other questions?
Yes, we've got about 5 other questions if you've got time for it. Next question is, what map are you using?
The map I'm using is actually Google My Maps. It's kind of funny because a lot of people have been asking what map I'm using because it's heavily detailed. The truth of this is that I'm doing all this by hand. I actually manually input every little dot in all the front lines. And this is done on an app called, well, not an app, it's a system built into most computers called Google My Maps. And funnily enough, it's usually used for people who are planning a walking expedition, but I decided that it fit the perfect criteria to be able to draw up front lines and lay down important points of interest. So do we have any others?
Yes. All right, next one says, hi, recent video shows Ukraine beating up Indian students. What is your opinion on that?
I have not seen that video at the moment, so I can't really comment on it. Next question.
Okay. Does the Starlink internet provide any benefit in Ukraine?
As far as I was told yesterday in the chat by some Ukrainians who were over there, the Starlink system is working and they are able to use it. So that'll help me report on the war a little bit better because more information and videos can get out that will give us a better idea of the current situation. Next question.
Okay. Yesterday, you mentioned something about posting the link to the map with the, in quotes, when this is over. Did you mean the conflict or just last night, trying to follow along with you and explore your map?
I kind of meant that as in the war last night when you probably asked that question. But over the course of the next few hours, I got so many requests to make this map public or to give people access to it that I'm currently looking into a way to make this map public. But at the moment, I haven't figured out how to make the map public, but at the same time make it to where I have an exclusive version of it. At the moment, it looks like I can share it and then people can add to it. And I'm scared if I did that and I let a whole bunch of people on here, there may be like Russian bots or trolls that will get on here and destroy the map. So at the moment, there isn't a map, but the situation has changed from when I answered that last night, and this map will be coming out soon, and I'll most likely post it at the end of this stream every day with all the updated information for each day. And the last question?
All right, final question from this section. Can you please talk about the 6 Russian ships and 1 submarine in the Black Sea, and what about the 2 Ukraine ships?
At the moment, I've currently been getting no information from the Black Sea. I know that's a bit of a misfortune to some of y'all, but I haven't actually found any videos or any information from the Ministry of Defense that I can corroborate about any of the Russian fleets or Ukrainian naval movements in the Black Sea. So sadly, I can't answer that right now due to a lack of information, but I'll try and get something for y'all. And so now we're going to move on to the next area of the front, which, funnily enough, and surprisingly enough, nothing has happened at Krolovets. For a short while, there was a brief firefight there, but no more videos have come out, and there's also been no evidence of the Russians moving down the E-101 highway. However, yesterday, a Russian convoy was seen speeding down the H0, I believe that is the HD7. There was Russian convoy moving down the HD7, but no video evidence have been shown of that convoy moving any further towards Kiev. So at the moment, this northeastern area has remained static. Meanwhile, at the city of Sumi, there have been some more developments today, as there has been even another T-90. This is the 4th recorded T-90A to be destroyed in the area of Sumi. Here's the pictures, and I'll let y'all see what it looks like.
Сироватка, блядь, Харківська. Проїзд від Сум. Горить, сука. Москальська.
At this point, because a lot of people keep on saying, and I've been hearing it repeated, even after last night's stream, that wait until the Russians send their best and greatest, and then they'll start really steamrolling the Ukrainians. And so far, what I've seen is that just simply is not true. Now they've brought out T-80 BVMs and T-98s, which in actual service is their best stuff. The T-14 Armata only has 14 of them in service, so I don't really count it as a standard vehicle in the Russian army due to its small numbers. So at the moment, they are throwing their best at the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are just beating the living daylights out of them. Also, kind of a funny thing, a Ukrainian in the area, a Ukrainian farmer, stole a BTR with his tractor. And so I'll show you all that real quick because it was pretty funny as well.
Хуярим. Спиздили БТР, блядь.
You just got to say, I have to say that today there hasn't been a lot of major frontline movements, but there have been a lot of pictures and video evidence of Ukrainian farmers and civilians simply driving off abandoned tanks by the Russian army. So if they're returning them in and they're not destroyed by the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians may think that they are still active Russian vehicles and they're being turned over to the Ukrainians, we may start to see that Ukrainian numbers will be bolstered by captured Russian vehicles because it appears that there's such a large amount of them that accounts of them just simply being, driven away by civilians is becoming very commonplace. Meanwhile, in the area of Zlorobsha, I have a video of TB2s mopping up the Russians and their convoys. The locations of both of these videos are unknown, so this area on the map is not accurate. I just put it down so that way I could reference it in the video. Here's the first video itself. You can actually see the Russians, the black dots. They are actually running off from the convoy because they know that the death and destruction that this TB2 is about to rain down on this convoy is going to be unparalleled. Running a quick video, but it shows that an entire convoy that is just sitting in the middle of nowhere has been destroyed. We also have another video of another convoy being destroyed by a TB2. It appears that it's made up of nothing but AA aircraft. And what's really odd to me is that these AA aircraft have not been activated to destroy the drone. This suggests one of two things. Either the AA group is incompetent and they weren't able to detect the aircraft or shoot it down, or the second option is that the Russians do not have the ability to detect this drone on radar. It has to be one or the other. Either they cannot see it or they're incompetent. But anyways, I'll show you all the video.
Где наш штурман? Хай рассчитывает, штурманский расчет делает.
I'll try and speed this up so y'all don't have to sit around for too long. You can see that another hit was made up there. In short, there will be less Russian AA defense tomorrow than there was today, as long as there are no more reinforcements to the area that the drone strike was conducted in. Meanwhile, there has been a video from the city of Trostianets that shows that there are Russians currently there, which suggests that there has been a shift in the front line, and they're currently trying to maneuver around Sumi and bypass it due to the stiff resistance. So, to kind of elaborate on the video that we're watching here, I do not believe, because I've seen a couple of maps that other people have made, in their own attempt to try and map out what's going on with the war, and a lot of them are saying that the city of Sumi has been surrounded. But due to the information and the evidence we're seeing from the fighting inside of Sumi, I have to say that that cannot be true, because here's why. I'm going to just lay this out in several points. First off, we're seeing a lot of Russian destroyed vehicles in the area, and so this will kind of lead into all the other points. If there's a lot of Russian destroyed vehicles, that must mean that the javelins and the other anti-tank equipment that they're using is well supplied. And if they're well supplied, obviously they don't have a stash that's just hanging out in Sumi. I do not believe that there's a military base in Sumi, but they are well supplied. So that has to suggest one thing, and that means that there are still logistical supplies that can reach Sumi and resupply the soldiers there. Because of a siege had been going on for about 3 days, which is what I've seen on at least pro-Russian maps and even a few Ukrainian maps. I believe they would be out of ammunition nearly at this point with the amount of fighting and destruction that's going on around the city of Sumi that the Ukrainians are inflicting on the Russians. And so I do not believe that the city has been encircled. I believe that they're fighting on and they're even holding their flanks while the Russians are desperately trying to bypass the city to just make any kind of ground, even if it's not even strategically important, such as the ground around here. Although this convoy may be going to Orkturka. They may be going there, but I'm not really sure about that at the moment, and so we'll get more information as it goes. So we might see another front open up here at Orkturka. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, Orkturka, I believe. And before I move on down to Kharkiv, because there is a lot of news at Kharkiv, I'm going to answer a few questions from the chat real quick. So what do we got?
Alrighty, so we've got 10 questions queued up. The first question is, can you please talk about the 13 Ukrainians that were killed or captured?
So, yeah, that's actually a very good question, because there's been a lot of talks and back and forth about were the men at Snake Island killed or were they captured. And here's what I have to say about that. We saw an Instagram stream from one of the soldiers on the island where they were being shot at, and he fell to the ground immediately, and then the stream cut short. The Ukrainians lost all communications with the island, and regardless of where the Russian ship was shooting, you would assume that if any of them were alive, they would have reported to the Ukrainians that they were being captured or had surrendered, and yet that was not done. And so that tells me that if any of them were captured, there may have only been like about 2 or 3 of them left alive, and not the amount that the Russians showed, because there was 13 guys on that island, and the Russians are showing a video saying that, look at all these Ukrainians that we captured from Snake Island. There's like 24 of them in the video. And so I know that the Ukrainians are not some sort of asexual bacteria that are able to reproduce through mitosis. So the Russian propaganda video is just straight up misinformation, because there wasn't even that many soldiers on the island in the first place. So at this point, I can't say anything definitively, because it may be true that they were all captured, it may be true that they're all dead, but I don't believe that it's one extreme or the other. I believe that most of them were killed and maybe a few were captured, or it may be, but I'm mostly leaning towards most of them were probably killed still. Next question.
Do you have access to flight radar? And if so, would you tell us what you see in Ukraine and nearby?
I do not have access to flight radar, but we can try and pull up a flight radar map real quick and see what we can find. Let's see here. So let's go over to Ukraine. I'm going to be honest with y'all, I don't really know how to work this, so we'll have to... Oh, wait a minute, it's working now. Alright, so we have one aircraft that's flying somewhat close, and it looks like it is absolutely unregistered, but it has a ground speed of 94 knots. So I don't really know what kind of aircraft that would be. Let's see the pattern it's taking. Ah, that's probably an AWACS, because it's just flying in a pattern over an area in the middle of nowhere in Poland. So I'm not really sure what that is, but I'm assuming that it may be an AWACS by the U.S. Air Force or another Air Force. Also, there appear... Let's give it a minute to load. This may be lagging a little. but it appears that we have one aircraft, well, two. We have an Air India. Everyone may remember that there was actually an Air India that looked like it was going to fly straight into Ukraine at the beginning of the war. That caused a lot of discussion, but it appears that this one's become a little bit smarter and it's flying around Ukraine. Also, we have a Russian IL-76 that appears to be flying from Moscow to an undisclosed location in Belarus. I do not know where it's going. It could really be going anywhere, so I won't leave any assumptions on that. And on that note, we're going to drop the flight tracker because I usually try and report on videos and evidence that happened around the front lines today. And so we'll go on to the next question.
Alrighty. Next question is also related to aircraft. If Ukraine knows the location of the Russian convoy and they have drones, why haven't they wiped out the convoy?
Right now, I do not know if they have begun to wipe out the convoy or not. Usually that information comes out the next day. So if it is being destroyed, it'll probably be covered tomorrow in day 6. But there is one reason why, and it may be because the Russians are actually able to shoot down the drones. And so what the drones are being used in is a role where they're kind of passive, where they exploit weak spots in the Russian air defense, and then they destroy convoys within that area, but they're not trying to just fly the drones into an area that's nearly suicidal and have them destroyed in an attempt to destroy maybe a few vehicles. Because you do have to remember that the Ukrainian assets that they have, such as aircraft, drones, tanks, and so on, is in a limited number, a much limited number, compared to what the Russians have on paper, and they're able to field, at least in the number figures on paper. So they can't really just risk flying a drone into an area that may be well guarded. So that may be why the convoy hasn't been reported as destroyed or taking casualties yet. But we'll have to see as we go on into day 6. Next question.
Alrighty. I heard a Russian airport was being hit by Ukraine missiles. What do you know about this?
Russian airport being hit by Ukraine missiles. I believe you're talking about something that happened a few days ago. I didn't mark it on the map because there was never a surefire location, at least in the videos I saw, that was being given. But there was a Russian airport that was hit by some kind of munitions. I was not sure if they were aircraft dropped. No, I'm sorry, correction. They did clear it up later. It was a cruise missile that hit the airport, and it had destroyed Su-27 and I believe an Su-30, if I'm correct. But don't hold me to that because I'm not really sure. I saw that article. It didn't have a location, so I kind of just dropped it because I didn't want to report anything as misinformation as to where that aircraft had been destroyed. And we'll move on to the last question, and then I'll start talking about the Kharkiv area.
Okay. Do you think the Ukrainian army is in danger of being encircled in the southeast of the country?
Well, if we look at this front line right now, and I guess you're talking about in particular they said southeast or southwest?
Southeast is what they wrote.
Southeast, yes. So you're probably talking about this pocket here that I've drawn on the map. According to some, Mariupol is actually not entirely under siege. Apparently they control one of the roads out of Mariupol, but in all purposes for what I'm saying, they've probably already pushed this and closed this at this point, so Mariupol will probably be under a siege very soon. But this pocket here, and I'll tell you exactly what I've been saying for days now, ever since I saw that they had landed a naval invasion here, is what the Russians are going to do, and here's the situation so that way y'all can see why I'm thinking this, is that there's a lot of defenses along the Donetsk and Luhansk fronts. This is almost like the Ukrainian version of the Maginot Line at this point. It's been developed for years, and it's the stiffest area of resistance that the Russians can face, and that's why there's been no frontline progress over this area. And so what the Russians have done has been somewhat smart, but still poorly operated, is that they landed a naval invasion behind those defensive lines, so the Ukrainians would see that they're about to get encircled from both sides, and their only way out would be further inland or going into the sea. And going into the sea is not an option for the Ukrainians, so they had to go north further inland. So that being said, this Russian naval invasion, its entire purpose is to start peeling the Ukrainians off of their defensive positions around Donetsk and Luhansk. So what they're probably going to do, and this is nothing but me talking, so don't take this like as actual Russian strategy. This is what I just think is going to happen. They're going to start sending a force up this road here that I'm drawing this line on, and it's going to start going right up the center of this pocket. And so what this is going to do is, if they push it really hard, it's going to make the Ukrainians on this side of the pocket and this side of the pocket say we're going to be fighting on two fronts, because even though the Russians can't push across this area well, they can push across this area well because there's no defenses behind them. And so what they're going to do is they're going to fall back on both of these bulges at this point, and they're going to move back to this yellow defensive line that I made from the town of Kharkiv to Zaporizhia. And that's probably what's going to happen down there. I don't think they'll be encircled. I think the Ukrainians move rather quickly, because so far I don't believe there has been any encirclements rather than at Kiev that has occurred. So I believe that the Ukrainians will be rather smart, and if they see that the Russians are doing exactly what I'm saying, they will fall back to the defensive lines that have drawn up along the N15. And so with that question answered, we're now going to move on to the area of Kharkiv, because there has been a decent amount of developments today, and some developments that may anger some Ukrainians, and rightfully so. The first one we have is that there has been Su-34 bombers spotted near Kharkiv. If you know anything about an Su-34, they're very similar in design to an Su-27, but they have had a cockpit that's kind of been modified on it. It's now able to seat 2 pilots, and it actually has a small toilet facility inside of it, so that way you can operate on extended missions, but that's rather pointless. What you do need to know is that it appears that bombers are operating in the area of Kharkiv. So it looks like they're not going to be relying on precision strikes anymore. They may start relying on dumb bombs and unguided rockets to start attacking Ukrainian positions, which could incur civilian casualties.
Это пизда, ебать. Это просто пиздец, ебать.
So hopefully the Ukrainian air defense around Kharkiv will be as resilient as the air defenses around Kiev and shoot down these bombers before they can inflict any massive damage. I'm sure we'll get some stories and information about how effective the Ukrainian air defense was tomorrow and whether they shot any down or not, but that'll have to wait until the next 24 hours. We have more T-90s, some of Russia's finest vehicles, according to what is said on the internet, and we see that they've been destroyed once more in Kharkiv. Here's a picture of a burning T-90 on the outskirts of Kharkiv. I just have to say at this point, the Russians are kind of a joke, because it's insane that they have lost this much poor equipment and good equipment. It's starting to show that the Russian army is just nearly incompetent at this point, considering the losses that they've been taking. And it leads me to believe that the Ukrainian numbers of almost 130 tanks destroyed at this point, and almost, I believe, 800 APCs must be true, because the amount of pictures that we're seeing of destroyed tanks, even T-90s, is just unbelievable at this point. Now, I know some of you who are more adept to the situation of Russian armor knows that the T-90 isn't actually that good of a tank compared to its modern counterparts. It's really more of an upgraded T-72. So if you know that, you actually know that the T-90 isn't that much of a step up from your average T-72B3. It's just that it has the touted reputation of being that much better, which appears to be quickly diminishing in the face of Ukrainian resistance. So moving on from that, we also have another one of Russia's finest vehicles, a T-80BV, that has been destroyed, I believe, in this picture. Yes, that's true. It's a video. It's been destroyed in the city of Kharkiv. Hopefully this video hasn't been deleted. It's been deleted. But y'all got a glimpse of it, so I bet y'all hopefully got the picture about the destruction that's been inflicted on Russia's finest armor. And that tells me this. Because Russia has hardly admitted to any casualties at all. Right now, they finally said, I believe today, that we've taken casualties, yes, but there's only about a dozen of them, so it's not that bad. You know they're lying, because we see so many pictures of Russian destroyed vehicles alone, much less bodies, that tells you that they're taking massive casualties beyond belief. And so, my point in saying that is pretty much they're getting completely floored. And they're saying, on top of that, with the propaganda that they're saying only a dozen or so soldiers have been killed, they're also saying that they've encircled Kharkiv. And that's not true either. I can't ever get a backup or any sort of information to confirm that straight up lie. And so right now, at the moment, Kharkiv still holds strong and it has not been connected off from its logistical chains that keep the defenders going. So moving on from that, we also have some more unfortunate news today, and it appears that the Russians are firing directly on civilian centers now. I'm going to show you all this video. It's rather angering, but bear with me, and if you find it angering enough, go down to the link below in the description and support the Ukrainians. And if it angers you enough, go over there and help them fight. Kharkiv is a city with a population of 1.3 million people, and to put that into perspective, that's not far away from being close to the population just a few 100,000 under Atlanta, Georgia, for my American viewers. And so imagine that a populated center such as that is being bombed in such a way by a foreign army, and you can get the idea that there's probably untold amount of civilian casualties in that one video alone. And that enough should be the reason that the Western world joins Ukraine directly in this war, regardless of the consequences, because it appears at this point the Russians have no soul, and they're not even respecting the neutrality of civilians. And so that's my points on that. I think people ought to start going over there and signing up. Anyways, we got more footage of Russian artillery bombarding civilian centers in Kharkiv on the other side of the city. And so I'll show you all that right now. It's just insane. The Russians have gone mad. Apparently, the command has gone so mad at the slow progress they're getting across the entire country. They're making an embarrassment of all of Russia that they're going to start killing civilians indiscriminately to just try and get some kind of objectives achieved eventually that they've been trying to take since the first day, and on the 5th day of fighting, they still have not taken them. And it's an absolute disgrace that we're sitting by in the West and letting this stuff happen at this point. We should be stepping in and taking more affirmative action. The United Nations should declare a no-fly zone over Ukraine and shoot down any Russian aircraft that are violating it. We should be doing something at this point. I don't believe sanctions are enough anymore to justify what's going on over there in our almost neutral stance against it in the face of what's going on. And so before we start moving to the southern fronts, I'll take a few more questions. And so, what is a question that we have had?
Alrighty. First off, I'd like to say congrats to Pavel Shevchenko. Apologies if I butchered your name. He made it to Poland successfully, so that's awesome that you were able to get out. First question is, Enforcer, what is your military background, and why do you think the Russians are not using Air Force like in the U.S. invasion style?
Real quick, I would like to talk to Pavel Shevchenko because he's been in the stream since the second day, and he was talking about he would go over there and join up. And I'm so glad that you're going over there and fighting for the country of Ukraine. I know it means a lot to them, and any extra man they can get, it will change the front line significantly, especially if you're as determined as President Zelensky in defending the country. And now to address the question about my military experience, the fact of the matter is I actually have no military experience whatsoever. And so that's why I make sure that whenever I say anything going on, I always make sure to preface it with, this is just what I'm saying, because I don't want anyone to think that I'm some kind of expert in the field. I have not been trained at any academy like West Point. I did get an offer to go to VMI, but due to some medical issues, I can't even be drafted, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I don't have any military experience. What I said, and I have to say this so that way no one thinks I'm just an armchair general. The Russians' plan is very plain. I'll show you this just to back that up. This area, all the lines in red and some of the areas in maroon are what the Russians have captured so far. And this was the situation at the first 24 hours of fighting. And the areas in green were the areas I said they were going to try and push. I said they would try and take the cities of Mariupol, Mykolaiv, they would try and encircle the city of Kharkiv and Sumi, and then they would try and encircle the city of Kiev and most likely put it under siege. And so 5 days later, we see that the city of Kiev is under siege. They have tried to encircle the cities of Sumi and Kharkiv, and they've been unsuccessful, and they've captured the cities of Melitopol and Kherson, and they've moved on to Mykolaiv. And so, while I don't have any military experience, so far my predictions and what's been happening in this war have been fairly accurate, luckily, and also, I guess because the Russians have such a easy plan to see through, that you could really see through it with a lot of ease. But the problem is that even if you can see what they're doing relatively easily, the problem for the Ukrainians is actually fighting such an onslaught against their country, because the Russians outnumber them rather heavily in most regards. But it doesn't even matter, because the Ukrainians make up for that in their resistance, their strength, and their will. And so while the Russians have manpower, the Ukrainians have will, and nothing can beat willpower. If you have willpower, you might as well have won the manpower war as well. So do we have another question?
All right, next question. I'm going to combine two together. Why aren't the Ukrainians using IEDs to slow the Russians? And then also, what's inside a Molotov cocktail?
So I don't know why the IEDs have not been used yet. There has been a lot of talk on the internet about using IEDs, but I believe the Ukrainians are getting kind of a little worried about using that, because then they might be viewed by the Russians as attacks on them directly by the civilians, and I believe they're scared of even more reprisals against Ukrainian civilians by the Russian military, and so they don't really want to incur that. And what's inside of a Molotov cocktail depends on who's making it, because there's been two kinds of ways that we've seen Molotov cocktails being produced in Ukraine. One is straight gasoline, which is probably not the best way to make one. There is a better way. Straight gasoline, and then they put a rag in the top, and they soak that with kerosene or gasoline as well, and then you light up the cloth on the top of the bottle, you throw it at something, it shatters, and it begins to burn. The best way to make a Molotov cocktail, from what I've been told, now I'm not saying this is the best way, and I'm not telling anyone to make one, because that would get the FBI at my door tomorrow probably, but the best way for my Ukrainian viewers who may just be interested in it for nostalgic purposes is that you get a usually glass bottle. Glass is the best because it shatters. And you fill it with a mixture of gasoline and styrofoam, or some form of styrofoam like that. And so you mix them together, and it creates this kind of sticky, solid substance that's still liquidy, kind of like honey. And really, it's just napalm in a very cheap way. And so you put that inside the bottle, you put the cloth on top, soak it in gasoline, light that thing up, and when you throw it at something, the gas doesn't just fly off the vehicle like water, or the person like water. It hits them and it sticks to them like napalm. And so it's a much more effective way of making a Molotov cocktail than the second way. But those are the two ways that I've seen people making Molotovs in Ukraine. Next question.
Is there any truth behind the rumors of the use of thermobaric weaponry?
I do not believe so. I've heard one report, but I haven't been able to get it verified, that the Russians did in fact use a thermobaric weapon on a army depot somewhere. I'm not really sure where. And I saw the video earlier today, but I couldn't ever find it again because it was shown to me by someone else. And the people were saying it was a thermobaric, although it had been reported the day before as an Iskander missile. But I'm not really sure. But yes, they are moving a lot of thermobaric weapons around the country. They're carried on a TOS-1 system. And so I don't believe those are going to become rumors very soon, considering that the Russians are now starting to indiscriminately fire at civilians. And so I believe they're going to start disregarding civilian casualties entirely and start using thermobarics everywhere. Next question.
Okay, to your knowledge, have the Russians shot down any Ukrainian TB2 drones?
Not at the moment. I haven't heard anything about it, and I haven't seen any pictures about it at the moment. So I believe the entire fleet of TB2s that Ukraine controls is entirely unscathed. And so we'll move on to our last question, and then I'll start covering the events that have unfolded here in the southern front.
Okay, this last question is a little far-fetched, but could the Russian tanks that are being captured, could they be being tracked as a way of identifying civilian combatants?
Actually, that's not that far-fetched, really, because a lot of people in Ukraine were talking about we ought to go up to Russian vehicles with Apple AirTags and tape them onto them somewhere where the Russians can't really see it, and so that way the Ukrainians can just look on a phone and they can look at all the active Apple tags in an area and get a general idea of where Russian armor is. So while I believe it'll be far-fetched for the Russians, because I don't really believe that Apple AirTags are a thing in Russia. I might check that in a minute, or after the stream, but I don't know. I mean, like, there may be some truth to that, but I don't really have information to go either way on that statement, whether I would say yes or no. And so with that question being answered, we're going to finally move down to the area of Dnipro. I know we have one viewer from the city of Dnipro who was here last night, I believe, and I have to wish him the best of luck. I think he said he was going to join a territorial defense unit, and if he is, the best of luck. I hope if the Russians ever make it to your city, and I hope they don't, that you will fight with the most stubborn resistance, and that you will survive through it and get many Russians. So anyways, speaking of which, he said he was making Molotovs, and we now have a video of the people of Dnipro making Molotovs in the street.
Видите, как здесь все делается для производства коктейлей Молотова. Сколько здесь людей. Уже на каждого российского солдата по 10 таких коктейльчиков. Хочу вам сказать, такие очень горячие будут, но невкусные. Весь Днепр работает. Работает над защитой своего города.
As you can see, it appears that the Ukrainians have had a lot to drink in celebration of all the Russians they're about to wipe out, and now they're going to start filling the bottles with the Molotov mixture, and they're going to get a couple of Russians if they ever make it to the city of Dnipro. And it looks like from the amount of bottles, they might never run out of them. So they might just start chasing the Russians back into Russia with Molotovs. Who knows? But anyways, moving on from that, we'll start moving on towards the area of Donetsk. And for the first time, I've actually gotten footage out of the area of Donetsk and Luhansk. We've seen that there was a rocket attack by the Democratic Donetsk Republic today with an MLRS. And so I'll just show you all the video and let it speak for itself. And so this leads me to believe, although there's no reason that any of this can be confirmed, and this is nothing more than speculation, is that this rocket attack is not really in this specific area. It's somewhere along this Donetsk area front line, but it might be over here. And if that's the case, they may start bombarding the Ukrainians over here and begin that push I'm speaking about down the center of this bulge and start trying to push the Ukrainians back to this defensive line. One important thing that I do have to mention, since this is a large area of land, is that while it is a large area of land, there's not major population centers within it. They're mostly smaller villages. And so while the Russians may gain a decent amount of land in the south, they're not gaining anything strategically important or any kind of major population center in the process of doing that. So I just want to make that clear to everyone and all the Ukrainians in the chat. There's no need to worry if that does happen. It's not going to put Ukraine in any worse of a situation. It may even put them in a better situation because their front line will be much shorter, and so they can put more forces along a shorter area of a front line. So in the city of Mariupol today, we've seen that there's been some very heavy fighting, which suggests to me, once again, that this area that some people are saying has been uncaptured is now captured by the Russians and the city is under siege. But I'll just show you all the video and let you all make up your mind for yourselves. And the tweet's been deleted, unfortunately. But what you can get from that is that there's a heavy amount of fighting in the area of Mariupol, and that leads me to suggest that the city is besieged, and hopefully they can hold out until the end of the war. Speaking of which, before I move on to the rest of the front, I do have to note that today the Belarusians, Ukrainians, and the Russians have met up on the Belarusian-Ukrainian border, and they have engaged in peace talks. At the moment, I don't know the situation of those peace talks, whether they're going well or poorly, or if they're falling apart. I do not know that at the moment, but the fact of the matter is that I have not heard that the talks have fallen apart, so they may be making some sort of ground. They may be making some kind of progress, but we'll have to see in the coming days if anything actually comes out of these talks, because Zelensky didn't believe that anything important would come out of them. He believed that it was just some kind of, propaganda set up for the Russians where they can sit there and say the Ukrainians didn't accept our gracious offer of surrender, although their offer of surrender would probably be something like Ukraine gets demilitarized and a third of it is annexed back into Russia because there's Russian-speaking people within that area. So we do not know at the moment, but I'll try and keep y'all apprised tomorrow if there's any developments in those talks. So now we're finally moving on down to the area around Kherson again, and this time we've seen a traffic camera take footage of a large convoy moving towards the hydroelectric dam right outside of Kherson. It's been deleted. Well, it was about 2 minutes long, and it showed about 100 vehicles or so moving north along the P-47. So, hopefully, I wish I could show that to y'all, but unfortunately, it's been deleted. I don't know why it didn't show anything of Ukrainian forces. It showed nothing but Russian forces, but sadly, it's been deleted. So we'll move on to the city of Kherson now, and I'll show y'all some Ukrainian, well, I'm sorry, let me get that right. The Ukrainians destroyed a T-72 near the bridge at Kherson today, and the video speaks for itself. It's rather crazy because it's actually a first-person footage of them destroying the T-72. And you see the tanks down there and the plume of smoke. And a second hit. And they claim that the T-72 was destroyed, which I'd believe to be true considering that they hit it twice. And it looks like both of them were doing a bit of damage, you know, according to the smoke cloud, if that's anything to go off of. But I believe the Ukrainians entirely whenever they say that they've destroyed anything, and so that is counted as a destroyed T-72. It appears that, according to the information, that the Ukrainians have retaken the city of Kherson. That has been confirmed today, because it appears that there has been no action, at least reported over the internet, of any, you know, actions at all in Mykolaiv, which leads me to suggest that the Russians may be trying to organize some sort of withdrawal and begin an attack on Kherson again to reconnect their forces. Because this bridge that goes into Kherson is the only way that the forces in Mykolaiv can be connected to the rest of the Russian front. And so since the Ukrainians have retaken the city, we can assume that the Russians have now been cut off in Mykolaiv and they're having to retreat and try and retake this city so that way they're not cut off from their already dilapidated supply line issues. And so another video we have is Russians at desperate speed moving through the city of Kherson. I don't know what they're at speed for, but it may suggest that they're running from something or they're trying to run to something. But I'll just let y'all see the video and let y'all think what y'all want. Also, I would like to point out one thing, is that these guys did not think that 1Z on each side of the vehicles was enough. They've covered every single square foot of this armored car with Zs. They mean they're not going to be mistaken as a Ukrainian and fired upon by other Russians. And that may suggest that that unit's maybe run into a bit of friendly fire considering the amount of Zs they've painted on this vehicle. But I don't know. That's nothing more than speculation based off of the video I'm watching. And so the last thing that we have in the actual city proper of Kherson is that there's been some bombing near Kherson. It appears that the Russians are once again having to bombard the city. And so I'll just show you all the video. And so it appears that the Ukrainians have actually retaken the city because otherwise, because I haven't actually seen any videos of the Ukrainians bombarding anything with artillery. I've only seen Russians bombarding things with artillery. And that would make sense considering that the Ukrainians are in a defensive war and they don't do anything offensively hardly, you know, due to the state of their military size and the absolute power of what's being fielded against them. So that's leading me to believe that the Ukrainians have retaken the city, or otherwise there would be no artillery bombardment because the Russians would control it, and then there would be just no artillery bombardment because the Ukrainians would not do that, and the Russians wouldn't need to because they control the city. And so we're moving on to the last thing within the area of Mykolaiv, and I believe it may be... No, we have one more thing in the southern front. But yesterday, and I'll show you all this video again, there was a video of a Russian Mi-24 style helicopter getting shot down, and I'll show you all that video again so I can jog everyone's memory.
Что там, мразь? Опа.
Диви, покрути его,
Опа,
покрути его.
опа.
Да, он пойдет. Падает. На саге, ебать.
На сагой падай вверх.
Ёбаный в рот.
Бля.
And so today, we can see the aftermath of that exact same helicopter being shot down. It, in fact, was not an Mi-24. It was actually Russia's best Hind, an Mi-35. And we can see the after effects of it being shot down here in this video.
Сбившийся вертолет, который упал на близнецы.
And it's been deleted, of course. Twitter has a thing with deleting all the war footage videos, but it was the exact same helicopter, and it was just in pieces across the Ukrainian landscape. So pretty much it was shot down yesterday, and we finally got to see where it landed today, which was around somewhere probably around that area, but I just put the marker there because they're both the same event. So finally, we have one last thing as an event, and then we'll go to nothing but questions. And so we've seen some AA action near Razdilna. What this suggests to me is that the Russians are trying to ramp up activity near Odessa, or they're actually going to start doing something out of Transnistria, which is a unofficial country that's within the borders of Moldova, and there's been claims that Russian troops are in there, and they haven't done anything, and so this anti-air activity near that border may suggest either the Russians are going to try and do something near Odessa, maybe invade it navally, that's nothing but speculation though, or the Russians in Transnistria have begun some kind of offensive and they're being supported by aircraft, and that's also speculation as well, but I'll let the footage speak for itself.
Нахуй, ёб твою мать, блять, пацаны. Ебать мой хуй. Ёб твою мать. Фу. Охуеть, блядь. Охуеть.
So I don't know what it may suggest that the anti-aircraft in that area is active and having to engage targets, but it either has to do with Odessa or Transnistria, one or the other. And so now that we've covered all the events, surprisingly they went by very quickly. I don't know if that suggests that there is a lack of action in terms of the Russians' offensive today, and they're preparing for larger offensives within the course of the next 24 hours, or if there was just less action today due to multiple factors. But now I'll start taking everyone's questions, and so we'll start off with the first question.
All right, we have a viewer following up from earlier. He asked for some clarification on his initial question, which is why Russians are not using massive airstrikes campaign like when U.S. invaded Iraq.
Yes, I think I forgot to answer that specific part of the question. There's two reasons. One, the Russians do not have a kind of military like the U.S. has. The U.S. focuses on a very large part of their doctrine is air support supporting the infantry, the army in general. And so the U.S. is focused a lot on aircraft production, procurement, and so we have thousands of them. And so when we go to Iraq, instead of having to rely on artillery like you see the Russians doing in most places, we rely on air support. And that really plays very much much better into a modern war, because while the U.S. has been known to inflict a decent amount of civilian casualties in some places, and it's been the kind of like area of controversy, we are more pinpoint accurate with a close air support than the Russians will be with artillery, like you saw in Kharkiv today. So the main reason why the Russians aren't doing air support like the U.S. is because they lack the ability to, and also the airspace is still contested. So you can't do what we did in Iraq, because we shot down the Iraqi Air Force almost within the first week or two of the war, I believe, in their entirety. And then beyond that, we almost had clear reign of the skies, and we could just send in close air support aircraft wherever. We didn't really have to worry about the positioning. But I'll make an exception to that, because someone's going to say, but the AC-130s operated at night, so they couldn't get shot down in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's true, but then again, that's a different kind of plane, because the C-130 is, of course, rather slow and rather large. And while an AC-130 does fly about 10,000 feet up, that's not really high up compared to some other aircraft. So that's the main reason why. And also that's a bit of a explanation of maybe an exception to that rule. So next question.
When will Ukraine start receiving all the weapons that are being offered by neighboring countries? Are they just driving them in on trucks to the major cities?
So that's a wonderful question because that one hasn't been asked enough. The aircraft that were sent over by the European Union yesterday were actually, I believe, flown in by Ukrainian pilots. And the story I've heard about that, although I haven't been able to confirm it with other sources, is that when the outbreak of war occurred, there was a Ukrainian aircraft flying in the air around Lviv with a whole bunch of Ukrainian pilots on board. And so when the war broke out, they, for some reason, flew over into neighboring Poland. And so when the European Union procured all these aircraft to send to Ukraine, all they did was put the Ukrainian pilots that were already in Poland in the planes and then just let them fly over, and then they fell back under the pilots, and then the new aircraft fell under Ukrainian command. Also, the other way that they're sending in raw equipment like ammunition and supplies, they've been doing it by truck at the moment. There's been a lot of pictures of it, but I haven't been able to find them. Like, once I look at them, I try and go and find them later to mark down with pins, but then I can't find them. And I've seen one picture of a train from Poland that has entered the country, and it's filled with nothing but, I believe, standard ammunition for, like, rifles, machine guns, and I believe a small amount of anti-tank munitions. But the rest of the countries right now are currently just trying to ship their stuff over to Ukraine, and I'm not sure how they're doing it. They may be doing it by truck, plane, or train, but at the moment I'm not sure. And since a lot of people have shown interest in that, I'll try and get more up-to-date information tomorrow if I can about the actual supply convoys from foreign countries entering Ukraine. Next question.
Conflicting reports about the ghost of Kiev. Do we know if it's actually true?
We do not know if it's actually true. I'm on the side of I want to believe it's true, but there's really been no talk of them anymore, and it seems that the ghost of Kiev only existed while the internet didn't think he was cringe, which is really goofy. You would think that if a war hero is real, they would exist regardless whether the internet thinks they're cringe or not. But after this large push on the internet of people saying, "Oh, that's cringe," I haven't heard any more information about him, so I'm not really sure if he was real or not. But I do believe that he was real because, even if he wasn't, it's just best to believe in it because it's a good story, and it's a story that kind of like encapsulates the spirit of the Ukrainian resistance, which is strong and fighting against overwhelming odds, yet still winning. Next question.
Do you think a scorched earth tactic might come into play in later stages if Russia is pushed back?
Yikes. First off, I don't think the Russians will be pushed back. I think they've already made it to most of their choke points that the Ukrainians have, like Mykolaiv, Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, Sumi, Kiev, and they're going to stay there till the end of the war. I think what's going to happen, though, is that the Russians are getting so whittled down over these days of fighting and almost getting no results and just getting a whole bunch of destruction in return, of their vehicles, their troops, that they're going to start losing so much equipment and men that the invasion of Ukraine, even if eventually they could do it, is just going to be unviable anymore due to the amount of losses they're taking. And so I believe that soon, maybe even during the talks that are happening right now, Russia will start to talk of some kind of light peace where nothing really changes. So I believe I answered that question pretty well. Could you read it off to me one more time to make sure I touched base on everything in that question?
So the full question reads, do you think scorched earth tactics might come into play in later stages? Forces, Ukraine or Russian, destroying infrastructure as they pull back from an area.
Yeah. Okay, so I was trying to say scorched earth through all that, but the Russians are still held where they are, and I don't believe they're going to move very far. These areas have seen some movement, but I believe they're going to get stopped at these two cities here, Perluki and Okurta. Okurka? Yeah, I believe that's correct. And I believe that they're not really going to be able to use scorched earth because they're not going to be taking a lot of land in the first place. Like, the amount of land they've actually taken, even though it looks kind of large on the map because I'm zoomed in, when you really zoom out on all of Ukraine, it's rather small, really. And so I don't believe that there's enough earth for it to really even be scorched. And I believe that the peace agreement's going to come while they're still besieging Kiev and trying to surround Kharkiv and fail at almost every single time they're trying that offensive. And so I don't believe there will be a chance for them to enact a scorched earth policy. Next question.
Okay, this one reads, the downside of using vehicles in this war, Is that the vehicles were useful for World War II, but modern tech has made just one man a tank killer. What are your thoughts?
That's mostly true, though the comparison to World War II equipment is a little far-fetched, although I see what you're trying to say there. Because while it is very antiquated compared to modern equipment, it is still generally relevant Cold War equipment, because a lot of foreign countries that are not Russia, for example, I believe India uses a lot of Russian equipment, and a lot of countries around the world use Russian equipment as kind of like the budget way of trying to build up a sizable military. So while they're outdated in their design, they're still modern in their use. So in that effect, uh, I just believe that anti-tank weapons have come such a long way. Well, really, honestly, I mean, like, they really haven't, because when you look in history, even at World War II, a bazooka was always able to take out a Tiger II. And I mean, like, I believe it was able to take out a Tiger II from mostly all sides at a close enough range. So I just believe that anti-tank weapons in general that are, similar to like some kind of like man-pad, I believe that's the correct term for even anti-tank missile launchers. But even like man-pads then were very effective against tanks. And so I believe that just carries into the modern day, but now they have a much more extended range. Next question.
Okay, just touching on the manpad is for air defense primarily, but the next question coming up here is, what do you think will happen to Russian POWs when they are eventually released back to Russia?
I don't really think anything will happen to them. I don't believe the Russians will do anything to them, because I believe they've had prisoners in most every war, and they're usually just repatriated into Russia very quietly, and nothing really happens to them. So I believe that'll happen again, is that once this peace agreement is reached, whether it's in Ukraine's benefit or detriment, they'll simply just be sent back to Russia. And if there have been any Ukrainian prisoners, which I believe there's been a small amount of them, they will also be sent back to Ukraine and repatriated as normal, and nothing will happen to either group. Next question.
We've got a question to clarify the meaning of scorched earth,
Scorched
or the
Earth.
scorched earth strategy.
Scorched Earth is a strategy, I would say, most likely, I mean, like, if you wanted to trace back its origin, I would say it most likely started with General Sherman's march to the sea in the United States under a policy of total war, where he marched all the way, I believe, from Tennessee to Savannah, Georgia in a straight line. It was 60 miles wide, and they burned everything to the ground from there to Savannah. Then in World War II, you saw, well, actually, it goes further back. It goes back all the way to like Russia's Napoleonic history. But we'll cut the history lessons short, because I'll be talking about scorched earth forever. The basic principle is that while you're retreating, you destroy everything that you are leaving behind. So if you're passing a power plant, you destroy that. If you're passing fields, you burn them to the ground and destroy all the crops. Practically, you're just trying to destroy everything that you're retreating away from, so that way the other forces, the enemy forces in the Russians' terms, could not reuse them, and they would have to try and rebuild everything that the Russians have retreated from the ground up. Next question.
Have we sanctioned Belarus? And I'm not sure who the we is in that sentence. And if not, why haven't we? Russia has staged artillery on the Belarusian side of the border since the start of their attack on Kiev.
That's a very good question, and I can't really answer why the U.S. and the rest of the world has not done that yet. I believe he was talking about us in the sense of NATO as a whole, and the answer to that is I really don't know. They keep on avoiding addressing Belarus at all, although Lukashenko is almost Russia's puppet at this point, and he's talking about invading Ukraine. At least he was yesterday. But I don't know if that's happened yet, because it didn't happen over the course of this entire day, and I'm not sure if it'll be happening tomorrow due to the peace talks. But he is directly being involved in this war. I mean, like, the basing of Russian troops and the launch of the invasion from Belarusian territory directly involved Belarus in this war. And so to that point, I don't know why sanctions haven't been imposed on them, and I don't know when we could expect them either, because it appears that the Western world just keeps on ignoring Belarus's actions in this war, although they're almost an ally of Russia. So that's all I really have to say about that. Next question.
Next question. I've heard rumors that NATO command and control aircraft are providing service to Ukrainian Air Force. Any truth to that?
There is truth to that. We've heard today that there was an AWACS deployed, and I believe we looked at a flight radar of an unidentified aircraft doing a pattern in this area of the map where my cursor is, and I believe that may actually be a U.S. AWACS trying to provide support to the Ukrainian Air Force. The U.S. has been providing satellite images to the Ukrainians through private companies operating in the U.S. and also through their drones because they've been flying Reapers. I believe they're Reapers in patterns around the south of Crimea in the Black Sea, and it appears that they may be trying to monitor Russian troop movements in the southern part of Ukraine. So yes, they have been providing support, although indirectly. Next question.
All right. Do you see anything coming out of the protests that are taking place in Russia, i.e., regime change, mass civil unrest, etc.?
I believe we may be looking at a situation of massive unrest. I haven't been reporting on any protests or anything like that around the world because I've mostly been trying to focus on the developments of the war within the country of Ukraine. So I'll try and include a little bit of that tomorrow, but I don't really want that to be like the major focus of this channel because if it becomes that, then Ukrainians who have been on here looking for news about the war in their own country, because it's very hard to come by just clear, honest news on what's going on there. They'll have to sit through like 30 minutes to an hour of me talking about all the protests and buildings lit up around the world in support of Ukraine. So I haven't been talking about it, but I do believe that it may be looking at a large amount of civil unrest. Sorry for the butchering of the grammar there, but yes, I mean, like the protests have been especially large in St. Petersburg. I believe they said there was around 100,000 people involved, which isn't out of place in Russia because usually every time an election comes around in Russia and Putin wins again, or he just steps down and then Medvedev becomes the president for one term, there's almost always a protest in Moscow that numbers in like the 100,000 person area, and so. Going off of that, I mean, like, this may be just a normal thing in Russia for protests this size, but it appears that these protests are much more widespread, and there's also a lot of condemnation in the Russian government for what's going on, even though that could entail a lot of reprisals and actions against these people who are speaking out in Russia. Next question.
To your knowledge, is there any sort of punishment for Americans looking to join the fight?
I was corrected yesterday by one of the viewers because I said yesterday that I don't believe that America is allowing volunteers to fight in this war, and they actually can, according to the information I was given. So I don't believe there's any sort of punishment for Americans looking to join the war. And so if you're asking me if I believe that you can go join the war and fight, then the answer is yes. And I highly support if you do, and I hope you come out of it just fine and you help the Ukrainians win the war. Next question.
Do you think the Russian generals are planning to remove Putin from power?
That's a really good question. I mean, I've been looking at that situation, especially since someone sent me a picture. I didn't include it because I didn't really know how I would include it and talk about it. But there was a picture of Russia giving, Putin giving a press meeting or some kind of televised, event. And he had the Russian generals. I believe one of them is named Sergei Shoigu, who's in charge of the Russian Ministry of Defense. And they both looked kind of scared and kind of angry. And I didn't really know what to take from that or what I should say about that. But it looked like they were thinking up something against Putin. And they didn't really look like they were agreeing with anything that was going on or they were happy with the outcome of anything going on in Ukraine. So we may be looking at something like that. Next question.
Okay. So have you seen any reports of guerrilla activity behind Russian lines? With those long, thin supply lines, they seem vulnerable.
Yes, I have. Actually, I'll see if I can pull this up here in Chernihiv. I believe I have a video of a Molotov cocktail being thrown at a supply vehicle, but let me make sure that I'm saying something correct here. I think it's one of these. Maybe? No? Oh, come on. I know I had it up there somewhere. Maybe it was out here. No? Huh. I know I had footage of a Molotov being thrown in a Russian vehicle. I just don't know if it's around here. Yeah, apparently not. Maybe it was over here. Yes, here we go. We have it. I'll show you the footage of a partisan attack happening on a logistical vehicle. It was actually a fuel truck near the city of Krolevets. I believe that's the name. Krolevets. That's the correct pronunciation. This guy has a throwing arm too. You gotta see it. It's pretty wild. So yes, there has been proof and evidence of partisan attacks happening on logistical vehicles. So to answer your question, that's a definite yes. Next question.
And commenting on that last question, we have a viewer in chat that says they're in Moscow at the moment and claiming that everything seems to be calm at the moment. Next question is, who do you think would be a good replacement for Putin in a new Russia?
Ooh, now that's a really tough question because the people who would probably have the first dibs on that would either be the commanders in the Ministry of Defense, or they would be the oligarchs that have currently left the country, according to what I've been told, although I haven't been able to confirm that. So I don't know all of them by name. I just know Sergey, who's the the guy. I guess you could call him the secretary of the Ministry of Defense, but it would probably be one of the oligarchs or one of the generals in charge. Next question.
That ties into a question from much earlier in the stream. If Russian falls, will Ukraine take over Russia to gain freedom?
No, I don't think they'd ever go back into Russia and start trying to take it or anything, because this is entirely a defensive war, and Ukraine isn't trying to seek some sort of like total victory where they march to the gates of Moscow and kill Putin, or have Putin kill himself like what happened in World War II. But I do believe that if there was a regime change that happened very promptly in Russia, probably what would happen is that the Russian army would be disoriented due to a lack of a command structure now. Because a coup would probably entail that everything going on in Ukraine would absolutely fall apart, probably because the organized chain of command from the president to the Secretary of Defense on down the line. I believe it's the Minister of Defense would be the more proper term for Russia. But that ripple of disruption would go all the way down to the troops in Russia, well, not Russia, Ukraine, and then the Ukrainians would just start pushing them out with ease, and then you probably see the Russians, the new government, promptly sign some kind of peace agreement with the Ukrainians that just leaves everything status quo. Next question.
Do you think that U.S. and ally mercenaries are on the front lines?
I cannot really confirm or deny anything about that because I don't really know enough information to say anything either way. So on that note, I'm just going to say I'm not really sure. There may be, but they're entirely volunteer. I mean, like, if Ukraine hired American forces and they were there fighting as mercenaries being paid by the Ukrainian government, the Russians would make an absolute outrage over the fact that there are American forces fighting in Ukraine, whether they're official American government forces or if they're a group of mercenaries that come from America. I'm sure they would make a huge deal about that. Next question.
Okay, so we've had several questions pop up over the length of the stream asking for current tallies on casualties from both sides.
The Ukrainians are not really forthcoming with the casualty statistics on their side anymore. The last I heard, it was around 137, and that was on the first day of fighting. So if those numbers were to be maintained, if they were only taking about 137 casualties per day on the 5th day of the war, we can assume that they have around 700 casualties. If that casualty number is to remain steady. But from the last report I've gotten from the Russians, and I'll see if we can pull it up real quick. Russian losses on day 5, and we'll see if we can get like an official number. There's gotta. Okay, so here we go. As of February 28th, which is the 5th day of fighting, 5,300 Russian troops have been killed. Oh, come on, don't show an ad. Anyways, 5,300 troops have been killed, 29 planes have been shot down, 29 helicopters have been shot down, 191 tanks have been destroyed, 74 artillery pieces have been destroyed, 816 armored personnel carriers have been destroyed, 1 buck system, 21 grads, 291 armored cars, 60 fuel trucks, 3 drones, and 5 anti-aircraft warfare systems have been destroyed at this point in the war. While these numbers look hardcore on paper, I do have to say that these are being released by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and while I do support Ukraine in their war, there is a bit of overestimation when a war is going on, as in the casualties that they're inflicting. So we're not really sure if these numbers are true, but I'd assume that they're mostly true. and mostly accurate, because we could see that they're taking a lot of vehicle losses. We don't know about the actual manpower losses at all, because I've hardly seen any bodies in most of the videos. I believe they've usually been removed by the time the video is being made. But we do see a lot of vehicle casualties, and so those can largely be assumed to be correct. Next question.
This next question is translated from a Portuguese viewer asking, "Where is the little bitch Putin?"
Right now, he's in a bunker in Moscow. Ever since this war started, it's been reported that he's been inside of a bunker the entire time because he's afraid of something happening to him from the Ukrainians. So he's in Moscow, to answer the question in brief. Next question.
Teddy H asks, "How do I get my wife to let me go to Ukraine and fight?"
Well, the thing is that you don't really let you go. You just tell her you're going on a extended fishing trip, and then you just go. That's my simple answer. Next question.
Any idea why the videos keep disappearing from social media?
Yes. Twitter has terms and conditions on their website that prohibits the showing of gore, and so I guess they believe in their implementation of their terms that the showing of destroyed Russian vehicles, even with the absence of gore, violates their terms and services, and so they remove those off of Twitter within hours. Unfortunately, because a lot of footage comes from Twitter, and so I get a couple of links on here that just go dead when I'm showing them on stream. And sadly, that means I'm the only person who saw them, and a lot of other people here on the stream cannot see them, which is really pitiful. And I'm going to try and see if I can try and get more footage, the same footage maybe, from a different location, but so far I haven't been able to do that. Next question.
As a thought on that for tomorrow's stream, perhaps you could record these video files locally. That way they cannot be deleted.
That's a pretty good
the next
idea,
yeah. The next question is, do they have a voting system in Russia, or is it whatever Putin says?
They have a voting system in Russia. I don't really know how it works because the Russians aren't like the U.S. with states. Like these dotted outlines could be anything from an oblast to a federation to an autonomous republic. And so they all have like this different way of functioning, which makes the way the Russian government operates really confusing and really hard to understand. And so I don't really know how the voting system works over there, but they claim to have a very similar voting system to most democratic countries. But oddly enough, Putin has never lost, and somehow all of his opponents usually wind up dead if they have a good chance of winning. So with that being said, I don't really think they have like a democratic voting system in Russia. I believe it's more on paper like North Korea's. Next question.
Does the Ukraine use landmines?
They do use landmines. They have a lot of landmines. Well, actually, both sides have a lot of landmines on the Donetsk and Luhansk fronts, and that's why I'm saying that there hasn't been a lot of movement, and there also hasn't been a lot of confirmed movement on this front, is because for the Russians to be able to move, they would have to clear the minefields, and to clear the minefields, they would have to have no enemy resistance, because if you have enemy resistance, it's kind of hard to just sit there and start looking through a field and try and dig up mines. And so they haven't moved through this front, and that's why they went and had a naval invasion down here near Mariupol, is because they could start peeling the Ukrainians off of this heavily defended area with the minefields and such, and so that way they can get here with no resistance and clear out the way for the infantry and the tanks to move forward. So that's kind of my answer to that, is that yes, they do use mines, and it's mostly in the area of Donetsk and Luhansk. Next question.
Next question. Is there any truth to the rumor that a Chechen battalion commander switched sides with his entire battle group?
I don't really know about that. That hasn't been confirmed. But on good news, although Chechens switching sides is good news, there has been other good news that the Chechen commander, I believe it's no, it's not that one. I believe it may be one further close to the city, was killed somewhere in this area, and I believe I still have the tag for it, although I can't find it. And that's weird.
On that same topic, would you give the viewers a brief rundown on the legend of your map? What do the colors mean?
So the colors mean, well, the colors are color-coded to the days, and day 1 and day 2 was color-coded exactly the same in green, because I hardly made any notations on the map. saying what happened on the first and second days. Usually I would just go around and kind of zoom into an area and talk about what I had heard. And then I found out that I could report a lot more information and better and show exactly where it's happening if I actually just added the links to all these videos I'm talking about on the map. And so on the third day, all of the icons were colored yellow. On the fourth day, all the icons are red. And on the fifth day, all of them are blue. And so tomorrow will be a different color, and each day, every time anything's added to this map, the color will be different for the day. So that way you can kind of see the development of the war by the pins. Next question.
This one's from earlier on in the stream. Do you have any intel on what kind of military aid Ukraine is receiving?
Yes, we do have a lot of intel on that, actually. We know that from Belgium and the Netherlands combined, they're getting a decent amount of anti-tank weapons, as well as, I believe... Well, I'm not really going to say anything that's a hypothetical. I just know that they're getting a lot of anti-tank weapons from Belgium and the Netherlands. Lithuania has sent Stingers to Ukraine, about 200 of them, I believe. Poland is sending over trainloads of ammunition at the moment. I don't know how much, but I know that if an entire train is entering the country with ammunition, that's a large amount. And if they're sending multiples of those, it just multiplies, obviously. And so there will be a lot of ammunition and supplies coming from Poland. In Romania, they're not really sending over stuff more so than they're actually just giving stuff, because the Ukrainian Air Force is allowed to fly into Romania, land at Romanian air bases, and they rearm and refuel the Ukrainian aircraft there. So they're not really sending stuff over, but they're, giving stuff nonetheless, so I count that as aid. The United States is also sending over around $350 million worth of aid to Ukraine, and currently in Congress they're discussing around sending an additional $6.5 billion in aid, and I believe they're talking about is most likely going to be lethal aid, which means that they'll be sending over weapons, such as anti-tank weapons, like the M141 and the Javelin. St. Javelin has been known well throughout Ukraine, and so that's probably what they're going to start going towards. With the U.S. is a lot more military aid, more so than just humanitarian stuff. So yes, we have had a lot of information about the aid coming in from other countries. Next question.
Next question. Can you please explain Putin's claims of Ukraine neo-Nazism? Is it all just BS?
So it's kind of not, but I mean, like, it's mostly not, because there was this one group that was very active during the Maidenhead riots back in 2014, called, I forgot what it was called. I think it's Azov's battalion, but they were kind of like a group of neo-Nazis-ish, but they really weren't. I don't really know how to explain it. I mean, like, they used the imagery that would be associated with it, but I don't really think they were. And based off of that, I guess the Russians are going off of entirely just off of that imagery in 2014, that all of Ukraine is controlled by Nazis. And so I don't really think there's a lot of base and truth to the claim that Ukraine is full of neo-Nazis that the Russians keep on trying to portray. And so I think we'll answer about 3 more questions, and then we're going to start wrapping up this stream. I'm sorry if it was kind of a short one, but there wasn't a lot of information to cover on the 5th day. So next question.
How long do you think it will take Ukraine to build and implement this foreign legion, and do you think it will have significant impact on relieving Ukraine troops?
I'm not really sure how large the Foreign Legion will be, and the dependence on how well it will actually help the Ukrainians will be kind of dependent on how large and how well equipped it is. And to those degrees, I can't really answer anything, because not a lot's been known about how it's going to be structured and how many people are joining it. But if it's a large force that's well equipped, it should be able to help the Ukrainians quite well. I don't know where it would be deployed. That would be nothing more than speculation as well. So on that note, it really just depends more on the amount of people who will join this Foreign Legion and how well equipped they'll be by the Ukrainians. Next question.
Do you think that the U.S. uses advanced technology that the world hasn't seen yet that could help curb this war?
And as far as technology that hasn't been seen, usually most of the technology that military uses, that any military uses, is already seen. For the most part, there are some exceptions to that, of course, like the SR-71 and the F-117 for a short while. But largely, what they use is what you see. Like, the Russians, you see T-14 Armadas, and then you hardly see any of them beyond a Victory Day parade. And then you don't see any of them being used in combat because they're still trying to sort out some issues that they had with the first models of these tanks. And so usually experimental stuff that you haven't seen is still kind of in its testing phase, and they don't use it much. But you know, that might be different depending on the situation and who's fielding it. So maybe the Americans may be helping them out with some unseen equipment, but if it's any sort of equipment that the Americans are using at the moment, that's most likely some kind of equipment that is surveillance related, because they're not doing anything directly combat-wise. And if they did and the Russians found out, that would practically be war in between the West and the East. Next question.
Along with that same thought thread, do you think any of the other countries that are providing aid to Ukraine are at risk of being invaded by Russia?
At the moment, that's really hard for me to answer, because first off, the moving of nuclear missiles into Belarus suggests that they're starting to try and threaten the West. And also there's been a buildup of troops along the western border of Belarus by the Russians, which is what caused this little bulletin here, that NATO begins to build up forces on the Belarusian border. So I don't really know. It appears that there was a small escalation, although it's not like although it wasn't really like equal to what Russia did. You know, they activated nuclear forces in Belarus and put them on special alert, and then we sent over a few thousand troops onto the Polish border. So I'm not really sure about that. I can't really answer that either way. And so that was our last question of the stream. I thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully y'all like the new format that this is going under, where I answer a few select questions. I hate that I can't, because there's probably a lot of you know, like chats in the comment, well, a lot of comments in the chat, but I can't see them because I don't have the video up. But I thank y'all all so much for watching. Hopefully you got some more interesting news. This stream streams live every day at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if y'all want to come back tomorrow and see this again, I'd be more than happy to have y'all back. There's a Discord link in the comments below if y'all want to join the Discord. And I thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next 24 hours.
Україну,